Hi everyone, welcome back to the next diecast. In today's video, I'll be showing you my small collection of Matchbox Models of Yesteryear cars. So the Matchbox Models of Yesteryear series, or even maybe a sub-brand of Matchbox, not really sure what to call it, but it definitely was considered a series that Matchbox released. They initially released this series in 1956 to kind of be sold alongside their standard Matchbox cars that they were selling at that time. And the series would actually continue until 1996. And at first, the models were pretty much a very similar size to your standard Matchbox castings. But then towards the 1970s, which is when a lot of these models here are from, they became bigger, almost to being 1/43rd scale. And a few of these are actually 1/43rd scale. If you happen to have the original box with the model, like here's the Auburn 851, it will kind of tell you on the bottom some information about the real car that the model is based off of alongside the scale that it is. So this is 1/42nd scale, as you'll see here, just for a reference to how big these actually are. So most of these here are from the 1970s into the early 1980s, as I mentioned. On the basis of all of these, you'll kind of see a similar look that you would see on just a standard Matchbox car, where you have the name of the model. In this case, you have the 1930 Packard Victoria. These were made in England, I think, through maybe the early 1980s. It'll say Matchbox Models of Yesteryear up top, and then you'll have a number. For example, this is number Y15, and then this Auburn is number Y19. So Matchbox kind of mirrored a similar numerical system that they used for their 1 to 75 series of just regular cars that they were producing. And these were around the superfast era, which was kind of like the mid to late 1970s into the early to mid 1980s. And the Models of Yesteryear series focused mainly on cars from the 1930s, maybe in like the 1920s and like 1910s, but the majority of the yesteryear models, at least as far as the 1970s and 80s models go, were based off of cars from the 1930s. And many are from brands that haven't existed for many, many years, like Lagonda, Hispania, just to name two of them right there. But I've gotten all of these in the past maybe 10 to 15 years or so. Many of them were given to me by my grandfather, and a few of them I did end up buying myself at, like flea markets and hobby shops and whatnot. Like this Bugatti came from a local hobby shop. This Cord came from an antique store. But yeah, here is my yesteryear collection right here. I thought I would do kind of a separate video on it because the series, I wouldn't say it's totally forgotten about, but it's kind of overshadowed, I think, by just the normal Matchbox cars that you would have seen during the same, time period. And of course, the original Leslie Matchbox cars definitely, I think, overshadow this kind of sub-series. But these are overall, I think, really kind of unique models. And if you want to buy these yourself, you can find these for anywhere as low as, $5 for one that's maybe loose with maybe some slight, wear and stuff. And some of the earlier yesteryear models from the 50s go for maybe $100 plus, depending on which model that it is. But all of these here you could probably find, individually loose for maybe upwards of like $5 to $20, depending on the condition of the model and the color. So we're going to go ahead and I'll give kind of a quick overview of the collection here. We'll start off in the back here with my 1935 Auburn 851. And this kind of gives you an idea of what the boxes for these models were like in the 1970s and 80s. So you would have Models of Yesteryear up top there for ages 8 and over. Then you have the name of the car on here, kind of a clear window. And these are very brittle, so just be careful with that and keep that in mind if you do end up getting one, in its original box. You have the side flaps on here. You have the series number, Y19, and the name of the car, 1935 Auburn. And then you have kind of some licensing information on here, copyright 1979, made in England. And then on the bottom here, you have some kind of information about the real car, like about the Auburn 851. And this is 1/42nd scale, as you'll see here, and as I mentioned in the earlier part of the video. And this Cord came in kind of a similar box. I have that somewhere else in the house right now. And this Bugatti also came with its original box, but that one had kind of a different look to it. This one I think might be the newest one I have because it has a 1983 copyright date. And I think this particular version was probably made around 1984, maybe 85. And that came in like a darker red box, but kind of a similar style. It had all the information about the car on there and everything. So speaking of the Bugatti, here is the Bugatti. This is a 1928 Bugatti Type 44. And with all the yesteryear models, you do get rubber tires, very nicely detailed kind of wire wheels, and occasionally you will have branding on the tires. And of course, you have the full metal base and metal axles for the wheels. This one does have some paint, almost like cracking going on. I got this for like $5, so I'm not going to complain about that. And everything else is perfect about it. Like you have the very, just beautiful chrome detail and everything. And then you have the nice detail with this rear kind of chest back here. Just a really kind of interesting car. And you also do get some interior detailing. Some of these models will have side windows, but of course you will get a full interior on each one. You can see the seats in there and also the steering wheel. Of course, this is right-hand drive because at least at the time in France, vehicles were right-hand drive. Next, we have this 1936 Cord 812 convertible. Beautiful in this kind of reddish orange color. My grandfather also has this in the same color, but his I feel like is almost like a brighter orange, and mine's kind of a darker red. So they might be two different color variations. I'm not totally sure on that. But this is beautiful. You have, the piping going on with the hood there. Nice kind of soft convertible top. You even have some detail on the dash with all these gauges and whatnot. And a full interior, of course. This one's about, I think, 1/45th scale or something. But again, here's how the base would typically look on a yesteryear car. You would have Matchbox, of course, on top, what the model is, and then you have made in England by Lesney, and then you have the copyright year as well. Up next, we have the Mercedes 540K Roadster, 1937. This one actually does have a working rear rumble seat. Some of these cars will come with, additional working features like that, but most of the time you're not going to have any like opening doors or other features like that. But aside from that, the models are always very well detailed, which is awesome, especially considering that they're from the 1970s, which is just really cool to think about. Nicely detailed interior. You have the gauge cluster on there, kind of molded into that chrome piece. Spare tire, white walls. This is probably one of my favorites that I have. Just the silver and black just works well, like really, really well together. And then of course the red interior just looks awesome. Next we have a Lagonda drop head. Lagonda, I think, was a British brand. I'm not really too sure on that, but they haven't existed for many decades. But this is kind of an interesting, almost like a copper orange and gold color scheme with the black interior and the folded back roof. Then you have a separately cast piece for the rear trunk, which is a very cool touch, I think. Now, these were prone to coming off, these kind of separately cast plastic parts on these yesteryear cars. So just keep that in mind when you're trying to look for them, that they may have like missing parts and everything. Metal windshield, which is a cool touch. Yeah, it's the Lagonda drop head coupe, 1938. This one is copyrighted in 1972. And these axles were kind of prone to bending because Matchbox didn't really put any kind of protection over them. Like you can see, this one is exposed. All the axles on these cars are exposed too, well, except for the cord. But on this one, like, yeah. So just keep that in mind too, that they are a little bit, I guess, vulnerable and fragile. And, if these were played with and stuff, they would have probably seen some bending going on with the axles over the years. But I guess that's not really a big deal because not all of the ones you'll encounter will have bent axles. But I have definitely seen that on these models before. Next, we have the Hispania Suzia, which is an Italian car, right-hand drive. Awesome looking, like kind of gold wire wheels, rubber tires, of course. I've always liked this kind of dark green and I guess lighter green color scheme. It looks really, really cool. There's kind of a slight crack back here in the soft top, unfortunately, but that's just due to age, I suppose. Then we have the Model A Ford truck. Interesting kind of gold wheels. This is a toffee thing, or a toffee truck. Delicious, creamy. You got this side-mounted spare on this side. And then actually you do some detail on the grill and everything too. But yeah, cool looking truck. Next we have a second Auburn 852, or 851, I should say. And I'm not really sure why I have two of these, but I have one that's, I guess, mint in box and one that's out of the box. And you can kind of get a better look at this one, since this one is not inside of its box. But Matchbox did a good job with kind of the finer detailing on all these models. You have the separately cast lights for a lot of these, the nicely molded windshields, and like the nicely detailed interiors with almost like a textured seat. I like the red wheels also. They look good with these white wall tires. Next, we have a Rolls-Royce fire truck from 1930. Looks really cool. You have the tiny little Rolls-Royce badge in the center there. The ladder is removable like this, and you can put it back on. Has some nice detailing with like the seat and in the back too. Super cool. Kind of small compared to the other yesteryear cars here, but I guess it would have been kind of hard to make this to scale because it would probably be pretty big compared to these other cars here, but very cool nonetheless. Then we have a 1936 Jaguar SS100. Is it SS100? Yes, it is. Love kind of the cream color, or like the white on here. And this does have the folded down windshield, as you'll see here. They even have kind of the wrinkle detail for this convertible top. That's just super cool. And then, of course, you get the spare tire back there as well. Then we have another version of the Hispania Suzia. This one has a little bit more detailing on it with kind of the silver trim that goes down the hood. Then you have the detail for these kind of rear trunk latches back here. This might actually be a rumble seat now that I'm looking at it. It's either a trunk or a rumble seat. I'm not too sure. And then on here, to kind of compare it, you have kind of a nicer done rear license plate. This one does have it, but it's just kind of molded into the paint and not really, separately painted. And this one you can see here, definitely some more kind of finer detailing with the painted exhaust system and everything. Matchbox did make some changes to these castings over the years as they were in production, just to kind of improve them on their details and everything. So this one does have the white walls and kind of more fine detailing with like the paint work and everything. The interiors are identical, of course, as are kind of the plastic chrome details. But again, you do have some differences as far as some of the finer paint details go, like the silver trim along the sides and on the hoods of these cars. Then next we have the 1931 Stutz Bearcat. I always like the shape of this one. You have kind of that pointed shape for this rear portion. Nice kind of red and white color scheme going on here. And some of the grills and headlights will actually be made of a metal as opposed to a plastic. Like this one you can see is kind of like a brushed metal look to it. And these grills do get loose, so just keep that in mind and be careful. It might even be worth, taking them out, putting a tiny drop of glue and putting them back on so you don't risk, making them fall off and just losing them. But you probably won't encounter that too often, but I have kind of seen that with a few of these yesteryear cars. You get the 2 spare tires. Just very nice overall. And this kind of rear, I guess, luggage rack or something with the license plate mount. It's very cool. Then we have a Duesenberg. This is the Model J. Yeah, Model J, 1930, town car. And here's an example of the axle that is bent back here. You don't really have any kind of covering going on. So these axles will kind of get bent as the years go on, which can lead to the model rolling like this. So just keep that in mind. I'm not sure if there's a way to even get these axles out safely to kind of bend them back in place. You can't, this is all kind of surrounded by metal, so you'd have to maybe find a way to pull off the wheels. This is one of those things where I just would kind of, leave it as it is, just so you don't risk, doing some more damage to it. But this isn't really going to be like a frequent problem that you'll see with these yesteryear models, but just kind of keep that in mind if you do get some that are in like loose condition or in like played with condition. But aside from that, super cool color scheme going on here. It kind of reminds me of this one here. You have kind of a similar scheme going on. You have the dark green plastic roof, awesome looking wheels. You got that front grille and the front headlights going on. Very cool. And of course, Duesenberg, Cord, Lagonda, and Hispania Suzia, they're all long gone. But I think it is kind of cool that Matchbox, I guess, made these models so we can kind of remember these brands that once existed, way back when, like prior to 1950, which is just very cool to see. And last but not least, here's the first Models of Yesteryear car that I got from my grandfather. This is the 1930 Packard. I think he has one in like a different color scheme. I think it's like gold and red and has black walls instead of white walls. But this is just super cool. I've always loved the kind of black and red look to it. And this top is removable. I'm not going to take it off now because it is kind of hard to put back on. But you have kind of a nice texture going on with that. And he actually made this trunk for it with just a wood block, and he painted it black. Because he did get this secondhand, and it came with like the missing trunk. I think the trunk would have been plastic and had latches, kind of like the Bugatti back here, where it's almost like a chest sort of thing going on. But you really can't tell at all unless you look at it like super, super close. Just a very cool looking car. But this is probably my favorite of the bunch here. I'd say my favorites are probably the Packard and these four back here. But all these are kind of really unique models, and I am happy to have kind of a mini collection, I guess, of this series. That's, I guess, kind of forgotten about in a way, but I guess not really, because you can still find these on like on eBay and whatnot. So I'd say that if you're into kind of vintage cars from the 1930s, then I think the Models of Yesteryear series for Matchbox is definitely worth a look. And even though that they haven't been made for quite some time, you should be able to find these at, flea markets and hobby shops and antique stores and like online too. And I think these do kind of represent upper end model making almost at the time. You weren't really seeing, upper end like Franklin Mint or like 1/18 scale models until into the late 1980s and the early 1990s. So yeah, that was my collection of Models of Yesteryear cars from Matchbox. And I think if you're into vintage cars from the 1930s, then this series is, I think, definitely worth a look. And although Matchbox hasn't made the Yesteryear series for many years now, you can find a lot of these at, antique stores and like hobby shops and flea markets and on eBay, of course, too. So overall, hope you guys enjoyed the video here. And feel free to comment down below with your thoughts and what your favorite car from my collection here is. Thanks for watching.